You're listening to Dating After DV. Real stories, expert insights, and deep healing from women who've been there. Together, we're breaking the silence, naming the patterns, and rising from toxic to true love. You're not starting over. You're starting stronger. With me, your host, Christy. Welcome back. Today we have with us Dr. Kerry McAvoy, a retired psychologist, a Ph.D. in clinical psychology, and a mental health expert. Tell us about yourself, and thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate being here. Yes. So my journey's been interesting. It's got a lot of different nuances, but I had a private practice for over 20 years where I just saw kind of a general collection of problems, depression, anxiety, but also relationship issues. I probably was seeing abuse in the office, but was unaware of it. I'm sure that I had clients who were experiencing coercive control, and I didn't know it. I had never heard of a trauma bond. We weren't talking about that. So I in 2015, my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I'd been married 30 some years, and within a very short period of time, the matter of months, he passed away. And it just threw my whole life into a turmoil, just completely. I felt like there was a volcano that destroyed my life. And one of the things that I wanted back, because we were heading towards retirement, last kid was leaving home for college, I just was in this massive transition, is that I wanted the life that I had had back. So I started dating really aggressively. Met this, I thought, a wonderful man a year later, married him a year later, and on our honeymoon, or delayed honeymoon, found out that he had been living a double life and that everything that I knew about him wasn't actually true at all. And for the next 2 years spent trying to save us, preserve the relationship. And I knew when I met him that I had met a narcissistic personality type. Now, clinically, I wasn't to diagnose him, but I could tell he had a lot of the traits. Didn't know, because this wasn't talked about in graduate school, that this personality type was going to have damaging consequences to me as a person, to the relationship. So I tried to save us for 2 years, only to it never got better. I mean, I saw a lot of pro-change behavior, but there was no actual real accountability or responsibility. So we ended up getting out and was devastated. I just felt so broken and ashamed and wondered how could I have missed this as a psychologist. So I wrote about it in Love You More as a way to sort of make sense of it, partly for me, because the gaslighting was so extreme. Because I met somebody who had not only psychopathy, which is in itself a very dangerous thing, and narcissism, but he was a covert or vulnerable narcissist. There was a lot of covert coercion that was happening. So it wasn't like I could say there was overt aggressive fights or name calling or this, usually what things that we say that are signs of a violence or domestic violence. But so I didn't see myself as an abuse survivor. So I got out, and that's when I came across Patrick Carnes' work on what we now call trauma bonds, but he called it betrayal bond. Started finding narcissistic abuse is a kind of a growing discourse that happened, and then realized what I was in. And that's when I made a big shift. I thought, I don't really want to go back so much into counseling, but I would really like to bring more awareness and understanding to this whole dynamic. For myself, but also for the public that seems to struggle to understand that there are relationships where it doesn't take two to tango for it to go terribly wrong.
Right. And I'm so grateful to have you as a partner in this work. That's entirely the point of this limited series. So thank you. And I'm sorry all of that happened. I'm so inspired to see what you've turned it into. You have a book called Love You More. There's so much I want to ask you about. We hear a lot about the name calling, the gaslighting with the overt or the obvious abuse, and the victim internalizes, oh, I caused that. But what does the covert look like? How can you recognize a covert narcissist?
Yeah, I want to even pull the lens back further, because there's an error that a lot of us are making. And I really appreciate Dr. Ramani's platform. We're trying to, from a academic standpoint, identify these as different. So let me talk about overt and covert narcissism, and then types of narcissists. So that's what we're blending together right now even. So overt and covert narcissism itself is about the signs and symptoms that we see. Overt narcissism is the things that people experience with these individuals, the gaslighting, the subtle criticisms and the not so subtle criticisms. It's the invalidation, the whole gamut, the circular arguments that never go anywhere, the lying, the cheating. Covert narcissism is what happens inside of them. That's the symptoms that they're experiencing. It's the dis-ease that they have with the world, the unrest, the seeking novelty, the adrenaline rushes they get for doing things that are illicit, and lying. It's their internal experience. It's the stuff that we don't get to witness that they're struggling with inside. Now, we often say covert narcissist. What we're really talking about is a vulnerable narcissist. And who I met was a combination of a vulnerable narcissist who is also probably had a lot of psychopathy as well. So he's also a psychopath mixed with narcissism. And that's the other battle with this is that the cluster B, which is a personality types in the DSM-5, there are A, B, and C's. We're talking about group B. And group B, that there's a breakdown of the narcissist, there's the histrionic, the borderline personality disorder, and the antisocial personality disorder. All of them kind of at times can look like each other and behave similar to each other, but usually there's a predominant pattern. But inside of narcissism, there's different types of presentation. There's actually as many types as there are fingerprints in the world, but so it's hard to classify them. But generally, they're tended to be put into categories of the grandiose or the overt. Then there's the malignant narcissist. There's also the somatic or sexual narcissist, as well as the covert, or really now what we're calling vulnerable narcissist, and then the communal or the hero type of narcissist. What I met was a version of the covert vulnerable. I'm going to go ahead and call it vulnerable moving forward. But how it presents is what really throws us. And this is why it's often seen as one of the most dangerous ones, is because we miss it. And the reason we miss it is because they appeal to our sympathy, and they come from a standpoint of more of a victim position or martyr position in the world. And they tend to use tactics that are not overtly aggressive. It's more passive aggressive or more coercive. So what I liken it to is he slowly introduced an environment that we were living in that was basically psychologically destroying me. But it was introduced so subtle that I didn't even recognize that I was slowly coming under the control of him. How it happened was like I was losing privacy. I didn't know I was losing privacy, but now suddenly he was with me all the time, and I couldn't take any phone calls or any interactions I had. He questioned me about. He was controlling what time we ate every day and what kind of food we were eating. He was controlling when it was quiet enough in the bedroom that I could sleep. He'd watch YouTube on the television in the bedroom until 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. And then he would set the alarm inadvertently to 6 a.m. in the morning, so destroying my sleep. It was all this subtlety that basically started to undermine my health, certainly was keeping me out of control, confused, uncertain. And then there's all this passive aggressive, like gaslighting, lying, and all of that was being introduced that just created a lot of psychological confusion for me.
One reason I was really excited to speak with you is that you are someone like myself who is highly educated in human behavior, and how jarring it can be to not see it coming. You're like, I'm the one that would know this, right? And then to find that you're caught in it, it's like, what?
Yeah.
And my career is not really related to my education, so I didn't have kind of this outward like, oh my gosh. But I was stunned. How did I not learn about this in my master's of sociology in the family? I was really surprised.
Yeah, I was too. I think that the shame of that was there was layers of shame. One is being a widow. There's this kind of this almost stereotype that widows tend to do silly stuff and get into trouble, and they often lose the money that they inherit from the life insurance. And like, oh yeah, okay, no, did I lose it all? No, I didn't, but I sure felt stupid that way. And then also as a psychologist, it's like, how could I not know? And how does a psychologist not see the red flags and recognize that they're red flags? How did then I didn't know that this behavior was pro-change behavior was actually not authentic? How could someone, and he would even say that one of the things that intrigued him was that I was a psychologist. I've realized now as I stood back from the whole thing that there was this desire to play cat and mouse. You know how serial killers get sort of bored with the killing, and then they'd start to play with the FBI, see if they could outsmart them. I think that's what's happening in my case. That he decided to see, how good am I? Can I outsmart somebody that I think is at another level? So my whole marriage, this is another terrible part, was a sham. The whole marriage was a con. He basically set me up, married me, and I don't think he intended it to be anything authentic. I think the end goal was, how much money can I get from her as fast as I could? And can I do it and then walk away and feel like I'm so smart that I could con her like that? And so it was just crushingly embarrassing for me. But But what I realized when I got to the other side, and this is something I know the public does not understand, we really believe in the idea of individuality and autonomy and boundaries are like the answer to everything, is that there are people, and this is this terribly uncomfortable truth, that are so devious and so good at this, and that they see the world differently, that they're better at this than we are. They are playing chess psychologically, and that there are mechanisms that people can use initially that basically mesmerize and spellbound you into building trust and rapport with somebody who has not earned it. And they can also create a sense of a shared life, shared eh, sense of shared like history and future with them that is not earned and not real. And they can then tap into our innate needs for belonging to make us committed to them in a way that they are never committed to us. And that then opens us up for exploitation.
Let's talk about how this happens. So I've heard you say in the past there's 7 stages of trauma bonding.
Yeah. And so I want to even start before the trauma bond. The way that, because what happens in love bombing is the first stage of trauma bond. And what happens in the love bombing stage is how they then set the stage for manipulation. And I think if we can understand what's happening, that we can understand our vulnerabilities. It's like we always say to people who are trying to live a healthier lifestyle, don't walk into the grocery store hungry. But what we don't realize that we walk into every new relationship essentially psychologically hungry. You're going to be vulnerable, and that vulnerability puts you at risk that when you meet the wrong person at this time, they're going to cue in on that and weaponize that against you. So in the love bombing stage, here's what goes wrong. We often don't recognize that we have met somebody who is basically in a massive effort creating a sale. No, all initial efforts when we meet somebody romantically is it like, please pick me, please pick me. But this person is really creating a sale. And there's a point that they're mimicking, mirroring, and parroting you. So they are saying what you're saying back is a shared history, shared life. They are like literally mirroring your behavior. Like if you cross your arms or sit with your knees crossed in a certain direction, they're creating a sense of symmetry. So you feel like there's a closed circle that's just you and them in this world. And they're using what you're saying and parroting your language back, which creates a sense of, oh, they're like me. We have this symmetry. I've met somebody that it's like my soulmate. They're also, in addition to that, using eye contact in a different kind of way that builds fast rapport. Now, they're not the only people who do this. Psychologists do this. I did this in the office with people. Salesmen do it. Car salesmen, anybody trying to pitch you something is using a lot of these same techniques. So I don't want them seen as extra special. No, there are other people who use these psychological maneuvers that also work, and they often do it in your benefit, which, is me when I do this. I want you to feel trusting enough to tell me essentially secrets right off from the first moment that I meet you. It makes sense why I would do that. The other thing that they're doing is they're often testing boundaries, and you don't know that they're testing boundaries, and they paint this in a direction of in your favor. I'm doing this to help you. In my first date, we met at a beach. We're having a picnic, and I brought a whole bunch of stuff for the day at Lake Michigan, and he took it all, burdened himself down, and wouldn't let me take anything except for this tiny little like cooler. And he said, no, it's time for someone to take care of you now. It sounds lovely. But what he was, will she go along with what I want when I want it this way? And I didn't recognize that this was actually a test of me. And then he added this, which is called typecasting, according to Gavin DeBecker. You're not going to be one of these stubborn women who don't let me help you. So now he's saying that if I don't comply, I'm fitting into the stereotype that's a negative one that I don't want to be. So that increased my likelihood to comply. So we need to watch for those types of triggers or a way of framing things that make us think that this person is that casting us in a bad light that we are uncomfortable with. The other thing that happened in it right away is that they do this thing that creates a sense of history and a sense of like shared life. And the way they do that is they get you talking a whole lot, and they hear something that you say that they can then latch on to and then implant themselves as if that happened in their life. Like, say, for example, you mentioned that you went to University of Chicago and you talk about really loving the old buildings and walking across the green. They may have just been in Chicago once, but they'll act like they've been there and they walked there. And suddenly in your mind, you see them in that place. So you feel like, oh, we have this history. Maybe they weren't there when I was there, but suddenly you feel like we together understand what it would be like to go to University of Chicago. The other thing they do is that's how they create the sense of shared past. They create a shared present by saying, I have never felt this way with anybody. I've never met somebody who understood me the way that you do. They'll do something that makes you feel like you guys are in your own personal bubble, special circle that is unique and shuts everybody out. So though they've had a shared present moment that's special, and then they'll cast into the future and say, wouldn't it be lovely? They'll listen to what you want to do, something that's important to you. Maybe it's a concert you want to see, or maybe there's a certain activity or a play. Wouldn't it be great if we went to this and saw this event together? Can you imagine? We should look to when the touring and we can do that together. So what they now did is they created a shared life with you that never has actually existed. And you feel like they're like me. We have this life together, and you can see them in all these juxtapositions that make you really feel powerfully connected. And it's all unearned. They don't know any more about you. They can sell a little like note card, and yet you suddenly feel like you have all of this history together. Then they're using this against you. We all do this, what's called positive projection. So when you don't know something about somebody, you fill in with yourself. So imagine all the times that you met somebody and you just like know roughly something, and then you start to assume they're like this and they do this and they would be like this. What you're doing is you're filling in the blanks of what you don't know with qualities of you. And you then give them benefits of the doubt that they haven't, or you don't know, they haven't earned that. And so they're using that against you as a way by seeming so much like you that you assume we're similar. We have the same integrity. We have the same goals. And then they do what's called future pacing, which is a rushing of the timeline of things. In my first date said, have you ever thought about, what if you think about me moving here? I'm thinking, you just met me. Why would you be thinking about moving to the state that I'm living in? So they move the timeline. They'll do it physically, introducing sex way too quick, but they'll do something that just speeds the pace up super fast, talks about the next date, talk about maybe next month. And it hasn't been earned. You haven't gotten there. So that's how the whole love bombing goes wrong. I'll tell you, if you've experienced it, it's intoxicating. You think that you've met your soulmate. I didn't believe in soulmates, but I actually heard myself saying, I think I met one. It is an incredible experience. And it's hard not to like really fast feel intense feelings for this individual.
Wow. And that's just the first phase.
And I won't go into the same depth to all of the rest of them, but the reason I really wanted to emphasize that is because this is where we think that people who get into these relationships just need to get better about red flags. No, it's more than red flags. This is actually psychological warfare. I really want people to hear that. This is psychological warfare because the mindset of a predatory mind is competitive. They see the world in an extremely different way. It's not collaborative. We're not all on the same team. It's an all-out war. There's true winners and losers. It's the dirty kind where losers die. And their opinion is, and there's no one on their side. Don't make the error that I did, which is thinking, I will get him to trust me and think that I'm on his side, that I got his back. And then he'll have, no. They have no one's back but their own. Not their children, not their partners, they don't believe anybody is loyal and they think that everybody is ruthless as they are. This is a zero-sum game in their world. So really need to see that. And I think when we recognize and appreciate that, then it changes how this is. Because we fall into these ideas of grandiosity, thinking we can fix them or we'll prove that we're different or something. No, you're not. You're not going to prove that.
Yeah. Or for me, it was like, I can handle this. And that's part of something you said before is that it actually impacts everyone around you and not the person. So knowing psychology and whatnot, it's like, oh, the poor thing, I can.
I know, I did too. I thought, oh, he's narcissistic, but I can handle it. No, you cannot. No, you cannot. And that's another assumption that a lot of us unfortunately make. And we also think, I know enough that I can inoculate myself against this. No, you do not. You don't know enough to protect yourself from this person. They're better. They have been doing this since I think this is now hardwired into their personality. I think this is a deficit that's there from birth. There's a set of things that are missing, and these set of characteristics or qualities, assets really make them vulnerable to think in this way. And that's not something you're going to fix. So getting into this mindset of it's almost like we trick ourselves. I did the same mistake. I thought, I can handle it. No, you cannot handle this.
Yeah. And it's crazy as you're going through the even just the first stage, I'm thinking back and how at the time It was, "Oh, you're not one of those jealous girlfriends, are you?" And I'm like,
Mm.
"Well, of course not," which was setting me up for, like, mass cheating that I didn't find out about until afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, because now he's just set that frame for anytime you acted a little suspicious. I
Yep,
told you you sound just like my past girlfriend, now he's
that's
already set up,
exactly.
yeah, and set up the triangulation against you. So that,
Wow.
yeah. So if I then acted independent or didn't rely on him because mine was very about dominance, then I was being one of those quote unquote stubborn women that I didn't want to be like.
So insidious. That's
It is.
crazy.
Yeah.
And this is just the first stage,
Yeah, it is, it
so
is. So
what
stage 2
happens?
is, yeah, I know. Stage 2 is trust and dependency. So they begin to really try to, over time, to not only are they then going to be the person, the sole person they want you to go to for reliance. So they want you to feel like they understand you better than everybody else. That they get you, that you're in this together, but they then start to isolate you from other people. And this is super subtle in the beginning. It's actually not very recognizable. It all is done in your best interest or in the best interest of the relationship. Like if you have a conflict, say with your mom, they're like, I've kind of noticed that she does that to you. Do you really think I hate seeing you like this. Maybe it's best if you don't have so much contact with her. Maybe we shouldn't go have dinner with him this week because I just love you so much and I hate how she's affecting you like this. So you're going to see this subtle sort of insertion that where they separate you from everyone that you've relied on. Now, this is done for a very basic reason, and that is the more isolated you are, then they can control the narrative better. There's less ability for you to check reality, and it also increases your dependence on them. And they want all of that. They want you to be relying on them for validation, for safety, for all your basic needs. And by inserting themselves as the person. Now, here's how mine did it. And again, it was very chivalrous and sweet. We were long distance dating and there's 9 hours between us. And my area happened to face a tornado warning, and he called me and said, "Are you okay? Where are you? What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm in a secure area." And he goes, "Oh," he said, "had the strongest urge to get in the car and start driving towards you. And I realized I'd never arrive in time." And I thought, "Oh, that's so sweet. This person loves me so much. They want to rush and save me." It sort of appeals to the white, knight on a horse kind of an idea. Now, is it, later that what the person was doing was probably, I don't know how much you know of my story, but there's strong indications that he was likely poisoning me. So it's like, no, this person is not a white knight on a horse. This person actually wants my destruction. So, but they do this to where, oh, I can trust them and look how they're going to come through for me. And look that they're one person on my side in a way that other people I've always wanted that. So they'll really kind of embed themselves as the right person and you need them. So that's stage 2 is trust and dependency. Then,
Was he actually, like, physically poisoning you?
uh-huh.
I did not know that about your story.
Yeah, yeah. There's strong likelihood, I believe, that I was being fed arsenic.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. For a period of time, I had all the symptoms of arsenic poisoning, and I was sick for over a year after I left the relationship. I had very
Wow.
strange, bizarre symptoms, and it was so bad that I don't also know if you know this, that the way I got out was my son was diagnosed with leukemia, and I was living in Mexico, so I had to rush back to be here. So here I am, lost my husband to cancer, and now my son may have terminal leukemia. I mean, it was, thank God he's well, he's in remission. They actually today we can say he's cured. It's been 5 years, but it was
Awesome.
grave. He was dying, actively
Mm.
dying when I was rushing home, and the staff watching me with him said, "You're sick. You need to see a doctor. We're afraid you're going to collapse. There is something gravely wrong with you." And I didn't have health insurance in the United States. So I had to wait till that happened. But yeah, I was very ill. I was very ill, and all the symptoms, of course, as I got away from him, and he didn't have that kind of access over what I was eating and drinking. Those symptoms went away with time. So thank goodness I feel much better. But yeah, no, that's a whole nother part of the
Goosebumps.
story is
Oh
that
my gosh.
it really was a con. He did set me up, and he had
Okay.
a partner in this, and I found that out
What?
I found all of that out later. That you ever watch the movie Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with Steve Martin?
No.
Well, that is his favorite movie. He would even quote it. He'd make me watch it. He made me watch it, which I'd seen it before, but that's what they did. He and this woman set me up, and it was a con. The con was take me for as much money as they could.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I even near the end of the relationship, we were about ready to buy more property. And I felt like this internal spiritual prompting, God, the universe, whoever you want to call it. I was about ready to start rating my IRA, which I knew was a bad idea, but he was suggesting it was a great idea. And I could feel this inner prompting that started saying to me, if you do this, you're going to disappear and no one will know where you are because you're going to leave your community in Mexico. Not only have you left your community in the United States, but you're going to leave your community in Mexico and go to a rural place and you will disappear and no one will find you. Do not do this. And I remember thinking, I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to stop this. You got to help me. I don't know how to stop this. And that's when
Yeah.
I got the call. My son was gravely ill.
Oh
So then
my
I thought,
gosh.
there's the stop. I can
Yeah.
stop now, you know?
That is so chilling. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. The way the world works and
Oh, I know.
universe.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm so happy you're on the other side of this.
I am too. So stage
Wow.
3 is criticism and devaluation. And that's that stage is both subtle, slow, but also dramatically fast. So how do I mean that? So the criticism gets introduced like in your best and again in your best interest. Like because I'm setting up patio furniture, you know, how you get it in a box and you start to, like, did you follow the
Jeez.
instructions? Oh, here, honey, let's count all the parts and pieces and but I'm feeling like an idiot because no, I didn't pull the blueprints out. I just thought I could put the thing together. But there's a subtle way of like, undermining you and talking about it in a way that makes you feel a little stupid, but all done for your interest. But slowly that starts to change. So instead of it being like almost positive criticism, it changes into negative criticism. And that happens kind of like incrementally. But there comes a moment, and this is really fascinating because it's always that it's almost like a universal truth. And that is the moment that you are some way locked in and the deal is sealed. And for every person, it's a little different. What does that? Maybe it's you moved across the country. Maybe you took a new job. Maybe you're pregnant. But maybe you get married. There's some moment that the deal is sealed. And when that happens, it switches. The devaluation stage hits because they don't see you and need you. The convincing you to choose them is done and over. They can drop the facade. And usually you see the other side of this person in a profound way. Like there's a massive discovery, a big betrayal that gets uncovered. For me, it was on our honeymoon night of a delayed honeymoon. He opted out of being intimate to watch. I woke up to finding him watching porn and talking to another woman. And then on the last night, I get a text message from a woman saying, I guess the joke's not just on me, but also on you. I've been dating him for the last 3 months. So
Oh
usually
my
there's this
gosh.
massive, but he also dropped the mask that week. He, for the first time, he massively, punished me. I wasn't interested in doing things the way he wanted to do. He didn't want to be interested into being intimate with me. That part of our relationship in his mind was over. Because again, this was about a con. This wasn't about having a
Right.
relationship. So he then one night dropped me off. I think it was the second night of our honeymoon. So the first night was I fell asleep. He watched porn. Second night, I thought, oh, we'll recover. We had this big talk. He gets it. He wants us to work. He drops me off at the hotel room and goes out and watches a musical. So he says, I don't know what he did that night. He may have hooked up with somebody. I don't know. But there it was. Suddenly I saw this cold, punitive, scary person who is threatening me, kind of intimidating me. But so usually there's like this massive switch where you're like, oh my goodness, who, that's when you start to, you wake up and you think, I don't know who I'm with. And this person's a stranger. That's when that last night I thought, I realized I don't know anything about him. I thought he was doing this and working, and now I don't know what he was doing with his time. I don't know who else he was seeing. I don't know anything. And I realized I'd married a stranger. So the criticism and devaluation stage is slow, but there's also usually a dramatic moment.
Mhm.
And that's when the idealization of you. Here's another kind of critical piece to understand about narcissists and narcissistic relationships is that they don't really see you as a real person. You're a form of an object. You're like an asset to them. There's something you're bringing to the table they really want. Maybe it's your influence. Maybe it's your beauty. Maybe it's the doors that you open or the money that you have or the place that you live in, something. And but at the same time, they also hope that somehow you're going to fix everything that's wrong with their life. This restlessness, this constant dissatisfaction with themselves and life, this chronic jealousy that they battle, this boredom that they feel. They're hoping you're going to fix it, but they don't see you as you. It's almost like like a Disney caricature of a romance. Somehow you're going to come in and this kind of magical relation that love will change everything. But the minute you act human, it could be that maybe you used the fork in a wrong way, or you asked them one too many times, how are you? Are you okay? Some weird thing that to you was a nothing thing, but they suddenly like, oh, this person is a person. They're human and they're flawed and they're a perfect person. And you fall from grace. And from then on, you're never the same. They will never view you the same. You're now not the solution to all their problems. You're not the magical, perfect person. So that devaluation stage, that's the switch that flips, is that something happens and they see you in a new light and they will never go back to see you in the idealized light. Anytime we feel on a pedestal, anytime that we feel like somebody they see us as extra special and make us feel really amazing, that should be a warning. Because if you're on a pedestal, however high you are, that's the length you're going to fall, and you will fall. I had a mentor tell me way back in the day when I was starting training as a new graduate student, a doctoral student. He said, watch out for any client, but this is for anybody. Watch out for anyone who treats you like a nugget of gold, because the next thing you're going to become a piece of shit. So you experience the
Wow.
gold, there's the piece of shit piece next. So I learned, don't fall for it in the office. Don't fall for flatter. Don't fall for charm. Don't fall for all the compliments that make you feel great. You're not the best therapist in the world. You're a human therapist like everybody else. But we should learn to watch for that in our relationships as well. So that's stage 3, criticism and devaluation. Fourth is the gaslighting and confusion. Here is the hallmark of the relationship. If you feel confused, it's because confusion is being created, and it means it's toxic. I wish we just knew that if you're feeling confused, it means it's toxic. The confusion's being created. I just got to hear Chase Hughes. I don't know if you know who he is. I think I'm saying he's right. He's a former CIA operative that worked with people in the field. And he was involved. I don't know exactly what his role was, but he was involved. He said this. He said, confusion is your weapon. You want to create confusion.
Wow.
So when he would turn somebody to make them into a spy, he wanted to use their confusion. So pay attention to confusion. What they'll do is they'll deny what they said. They'll rewrite the history. They twist your words. They go into the circular argument that never has an end. They'll stonewall, walk out. They gaslight you, question your reality, question your feelings, question your perceptions. So that the point of it is for you to start to doubt yourself. So you're never for sure what's true or right. And you feel like you're going crazy. You start to literally feel like there's something inherently, profoundly wrong with you. And you love them. And then this is the other thing that's happening in this relationship is that just like there's intermittent reinforcement in the beginning, I didn't mention that in the love bombing stage, where they're available and it's the best time ever, and then it's hard to reach them. Or they really close and everything is awesome, and then suddenly they go cold and you don't know what's wrong. And that, by the way, is extremely bonding when someone does that. It continues in this stage too. That you will feel like everything's great. You have this wonderful night out. Maybe it's a really intimate, close moment. And then suddenly they'll act like something's wrong. And then they'll say, well, you know what you did. No, I don't know what I did. Literally, you didn't do anything. But there'll be the back forth. Or for me, it was, he looked like he was working so hard. He said he never worked so hard to save a relationship. He's going to therapy, talking about what he read in the books and highlighted all this stuff about sex addiction. And then it'd come back. And next thing I know is he texted another person. So you get this back, you can't tell what's true. Well, that's the problem. They're literally trading a dual reality. We call it the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde experience. The Dr. Jekyll is the forward-facing face most of the time or some of the time. And it looks like there's all this effort to sort of save, be invested. They say all the right things. But then there's this Mr. Hyde persona, which is a completely different person. And it's the scary parts where you feel intimidated, shaky, unsure, uncertain. And then they do all this kind of back end stuff that really tells you that they're not who you think they are. They're not invested like you think they are. And that's all of this. You don't know how much is true and how much is a lie. And you learn to cope with both people. And you learn to create an internal experience inside of yourself of both realities. You learn how to deal with the Dr. Hyde Dr. Jekyll that becomes the person that you live with. But you also are learning to deal with how to deal with Mr. Hyde that you keep trying to avoid and prevent from happening, which creates that walking on eggshells experience. Like I'm on this tightrope and I'm trying not to fall. And I know there's a right way to say things, or the right moment to bring things up, you do all this hard work to try to keep Dr. Jekyll around as much as possible. But it is actually impossible, because here's the part that we don't want to admit. Dr. Jekyll is the manipulation.
Right.
Mr. Hyde is the reality.
Wow.
And that's also part of the confusion, is we keep thinking Dr. Jekyll, because they say, is the real person. No, he's not. or she's not. They've been created deliberately to get you into this relationship and to keep you in the relationship.
Yeah, that's for me, it was one of the hardest thing to let go of, that and
Yeah,
the future that I wanted. And
right.
thinking back, there was so much confusion. That's so helpful. If there's confusion, it's toxic.
Yeah,
I wish I had heard that back then. And at
I
the
did too. Yeah,
time,
I know. Yeah.
as someone who, like yourself, we love academia and research, and I found the confusion almost like sexy. It was like, I'm going to figure this out, right? And then I'm going to
Mm,
prove to myself what smart or how capable I am to make this work. Thinking back to at the very end, at 4 years and 10 months, I remember just being like, I've figured it out. I figured out how to be with both Jekyll and Hyde. And I was so numb by that
mm.
point. It was like, I don't even care that he didn't come home because what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I'll drink some more wine, you know?
Yeah, in fact, that's stage 5. You just described exactly resignation and adaptation. You learn how to survive emotionally. You stop uh, trying to pursue your needs. You
Yeah.
start to, all it's now about is a conflict avoidance as much as you
Mm.
can. You feel exhausted because
Yeah.
nothing's working. So you feel like it's why try? You're starting to learn helplessness.
Mm.
That which then moves you right into stage 6. But you're learning that it's nothing's going to work. That you still though have a little bit of hope in the back of your mind that maybe some new strategy, maybe some solution out there in the nebulous that's going to fix this. If you could just be a little bit different or just be a little bit better, maybe. But you're resigning. You're
Yeah.
moving into resignation, which then causes which psych 6 to me is right happening simultaneously, which is a
Mhm.
loss of self. So that's when you start to give yourself up. You don't do what you want. You're not eating what you want. You don't have control of your schedule. The person you were before you met them is disappearing. You start to wonder what's wrong with you because you see that person disappearing. You start to feel like you're pathetic yourself because you feel like I've betrayed myself so severely. You stop trusting yourself because everything you thought you built your life on that worked before, that got you that good job, got you ahead of school, all of that stuff doesn't work here. And so you're like, what's wrong with me? And your voice is disappearing. Because you're learning that if I speak up, there's consequences.
Mhm.
If I try to do anything that's for me, there's consequences. So
Yeah.
you just start to like get quieter, smaller, and you're literally disappearing. Now there's something happens psychologically here too. So the narcissistic person does not have internal structure or scaffolding to deal with their deficits. So the
Mm.
normal life stressors, emotional setbacks, failures, just life not being easy, they don't have an internal ability to really cope with those well. They don't have good judgment. They're not very insightful. They don't learn from past mistakes. They don't control impulses well. Um, they don't connect with other people and know how to utilize people very well. So what
Mm.
happens though is because they project that out to you and then you take it on. That's all the stuff you're trying to fix for them, because it helps you then reduce the chaos. If I
Yeah.
can stabilize life here, then they'll be better, then we'll
Mhm.
be better, then I'll be better. The
Wow.
problem is because that projecting out though, then they project their bad parts into you. And
Mhm.
then you become bad because of it. And you start to feel bad. You actually own it
Yeah.
and see it as your failure instead of realizing, no, this is a failure that's coming out of this person's deficits. Yeah, I'm just being affected by it. So the loss of self is actually a literal loss of self. It's not just a
Mm.
sense of a loss, it's an actual real loss. And then the stage 7 is it becomes a repetitive, addictive process that the whole thing swings over again because the minute they start to feel you check out, disappear, get done, you're resolute, then they're like panic because they need you as structured. They're not, and they also don't like loss of control. They don't want you leaving on your timeline. They want to get rid of you on their timeline. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why they don't want the loss. So then they just do it just enough to activate the love bombing, which we also call hoovering. They pull you back in, and then the cycle repeats again.
Oh my gosh.
And that's why it's so
And
hard to leave. I mean, I averaged the statement out there, and I don't know where the research is to back this up, but I know it's true. I mean, I hear it from both men and women. If it averages 7 times to get out,
Mhm.
but I've also heard people who've battled this, like they'll say hundreds of times. I've
Oh
tried
my
this
gosh.
thousands of times to leave, and I don't know how to leave. I know for me that I waffled thousands of times a day. Should I
Mhm.
leave? Should I stay? Should I leave? Should I
Yeah.
stay? Is it working? Is it not? I mean, literally, that's back to that. You feel the confusion. It's
Yeah.
agonizing, and that's a warning something's really, really wrong here.
That in itself is so helpful. I heard you say something that I said to myself too, and it was, God, I need help. Like for me, it was God, I don't have the strength to get out of this. If this is not what you want me in, I need you to intervene because I can't. Like,
Yeah.
I love this person. I love the person I thought that he was. And I knew I couldn't leave. I couldn't make that decision. I knew I would question it. Granted, I hadn't tried to leave 7 times. I think I left 2.5 times
Yeah.
early on. And again, I got so good at dealing with it that it's like, okay, when he's screaming his face off at me to leave and pack my stuff, he doesn't mean it. So then I'd go sleep in the basement. It's like, I solved a problem, right? I didn't have to move all my stuff out. And having this conversation now, it's like my husband now would never even dream of sticking to me that way. And that
Yeah.
just was normal for me.
I know. Yeah, I got the same place. And I think that a lot of people do. And I actually, it was interesting because I was a very spiritual person, a very actively religious person during my first marriage. And then when I lost him, it just was like a massive spiritual crisis for me. Like how could God let something so destructive happen to me and take away everything? I mean, we were building a house. We'd spent thousands of dollars with an architect. My late husband's a civil engineer. It was going to be a custom home. I can even see,
Wow.
he says when he was dying, he said he's going to build it for me in heaven.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It was so I actually walked that property and sobbed as as put it up for sale. And then my son, I had to drive my son to college literally 2 months after he died. And watch this kid broken. And I cannot begin to tell you the degree of devastation my life was in when I lost my late husband. And it's 10 years
Yeah.
ago. So for me, it's like,
Mhm.
oh man, that was so hard. So I was not in a good spot with God. I felt like I failed to realize, I felt like I was sitting on God's lap, pounding on his
Mhm.
pounding on his chest, beating with him. How could you do this to me? How could you do this to me? How
Yeah.
could you do this to us? And I realized I had to be sitting in his lap. He had to tolerate me sitting on his lap to pound his chest.
Oh.
So really that was a really great imagery for me to see that. But so I was struggling. So here I'm in a second marriage and it's going terribly wrong. And I can't even tell what's true. And whether or not he's really cheating or not cheating, he says he's not, but I have a sense that he really is. So I got to the place to say, you know the truth. I don't, but I know you know, and I need you to show me the truth because I'm going crazy.
Yeah.
And then near the end, I started to say, I can't get myself out. I can't get out. You have to save me. You have to
Mhm.
save me. I cannot get out. And I actually, there were a couple of moments where there were pivotal moments where I actually heard, again, promptings where he said, this is going to happen. And this is a moment. And there's a door opening and you're going to have to move through this door. And then when I got the call, my son was sick. I again heard, this is a door. I'm opening a door. Move through this door. This is, you're going to be able to get out, get away. It became up to me to find the strength. I'll tell you, I became mute. Like I had selective mutism where I literally couldn't speak. And I'd have to say, speak, speak. I'd like push myself to say something, to fight
Mhm.
for my right. Or even at the end, when I actually have a text message of him and her talking about my money around my son's medical care. That's when I knew how deep and bad this went.
Wow.
And I had to like stare him down and say, I know the truth. I know it's about the money. He'll deny that to this day, but
Right.
I mean, anyway, yeah. I do think there is a piece of this where we do get to that's the level of helplessness we get to where there's
Yeah.
complete resignation. So a common belief out there is that the victims have a certain type of personality and that we're just kind of broken messes and that we attract the wrong person. In fact, you'll get on my social media comments a lot. So if I put out certain content, just choose better, or then you should know what to look for, or if you asked for this, things like that. And here's the assumption, and I love it because Sandra Brown challenged the assumption. It came out of like the 1960s and 70s, this belief, and it was out of anecdotal studies, out of case studies, that they were looking at domestic violence shelters and assumed that the average woman, and it was usually women who was in the domestic violence shelter, had this certain personality trait. Bad childhood, they had a lot of trauma, maybe they weren't very functional, they weren't doing well in life, and then they attract this bad element. So they kind of got what they asked for. It's sort of like self-fulfilling prophecy or something. So she then looked at 600 pathological love relationships in 2014 out of Purdue University and to literally say, is that true? I mean, because she asked, how do we know this? And couldn't find any research on it. So we realized it was just being passed down as like a hand, from person to person. It was like literally a stereotype. So she did a couple things. She gave them, I think, what's called the ACE. I believe she did. So she looked at childhood trauma. Did they have trauma? She also, because I got to interview her, this is how I know all the details to this. She also then gave them a personality inventory, and it's the Big Five personality test, which looks at 5 different indexes. That's very stable. It's about who you are as a person. And she took a really detailed history with them and looked at these relationships. What she found was shocking. It broke the stereotype. It's not true. 2/3 of the people who get into a pathological love relationship have had no history of child abuse or bad home or trauma or addiction. They're highly functional individuals, but they have 2 characteristics that are similar to all of them. And that is on that Big 5 personality test, they are highly agreeable and they're highly conscientious. And she calls those super traits because they actually are. Those are the traits that make you a very sought after job candidate. So if you were to be hired for something, that would make you a great team player. You would work well with others. You're a person who is open and amenable to suggestions. You're adaptable. You believe in the goodness. You believe that things can be improved. You're also a person who has a lot of integrity. You believe in following rules and boundaries. You're a trustworthy person. So all these are really wonderful qualities. But when you have somebody who does not have a lot of conscientiousness and who also is antagonistic, it makes you very manipulatable because they can use those things against you to keep you caught and trapped in this group or in this relationship. And she also found another terrible piece to this. It also, though, those characteristics make you highly susceptible to the confusion. So you're more likely to be confused. You're more likely to be damaged by the confusion. They're actually now finding neurological damage done by the confusion. There's actually research to back this up that these relationships have neurological consequences to our health. Only 1/3 had ever had a bad childhood and or trauma, but 2/3 did not. So I think that's the other big myth that I would love to bust open is to say, no, because let's like look at it from another angle. A narcissist is a person who's all about image. They want to look good. They want people to believe that they're good. They have the big front to protect and preserve. Why would they pick a broken down mess of a person for a relationship with? They're not. That would look bad on them. They want to say to the world, look at me. Look who I can attract. I taught this big catch. So they're going to naturally go for highly functional, very productive, amazing people. But what happens, though, the person you see at the end is because of this cycle of the trauma bond. It destroys the person from the interior, causing them to look like a poor functioning person. And anyone who survived this knows that at the end, you are not the person you were in the beginning. I didn't recognize myself. I couldn't make decisions. I was stuttering a lot. I was terribly insecure. I was scared to make a decision, didn't trust myself. I was talking incessantly about this. I couldn't shut up about it. All the things about me that looked like that I was pitiful, pathetic was because of the intense trauma that I had just suffered in this relationship. So we do look really bad. And you can see that what happens in the court, it kind of backs that up. We don't look believable. We look dramatic and hysterical. But that's not how we started. It's a direct cost of these relationships.
How does the confusion create neurological damage? Like in my head, I'm envisioning the neurons just like trying to solve it and then burning out. Is that kind of what it is?
Yeah, kind of. I don't know exactly, except that I know that it does do that. They've found 2 big changes. One of them is the amygdala. I can't explain it. So your body, your mind knows something's not adding up. Maybe you can't articulate what it is, but it doesn't feel right. Something leaves you feeling kind of uneasy. That uneasiness activates the sympathetic system, the fight or flight system. That chronic activation, it's not meant to be on. It's not meant to be in an alarm state chronically. It raises your cortisol, raises adrenaline. Cortisol in itself is going to cause inflammation. So now you got a problem now that you're on too much cortisol for too long. You're now going to struggle with overall autoimmune problems from the chronic inflammation. But that activation of fight and flight system staying stuck on because things are wrong. Because there's a swelling of the amygdala. So that base of the brain part that controls it actually gets bigger. It swells. The other part that gets terribly affected is the hippocampus, which is part of your limbic system. It's the center of your brain. It has to do with memory. It's part of your executive functioning. It's how to organize your day. And keep yourself structured, that's shrinking. So it's starting to get smaller, which then causes you to be more distractible. You're going to complain of you can't remember where things are. You're struggling with forgetfulness. You're not going to be quite as like logical. You're feeling like you can't organize yourself the way that you used to. So here you are now, hypervigilant, feeling restless, struggling with insomnia, battling your weight because you're either not eating enough or overeating, because that's all by the amygdala, and it has to do with fight or flight system. And at the same time, the things that kind of keep you organized, predictable, structured, it's now forgetful too, because the hippocampus is very involved with memory. So you're forgetting things, not remembering things, struggling to remember words. That's going to make you feel like you're just not really functioning well. So that's how it destroys it. But there's another thing that's happening too. It's cognitive dissonance, which is you can't decide what's real or true, and you can't decide what behavior to take as a result of it. So because of this loop of what's real, what's true, I don't know what to do, and you get into this, I don't know what to do, that's almost, to me, it's like asking the computer to solve an unsolvable problem in a short amount of time. And it says, I can't compute this. I just can't compute this. And it just sits there and runs. I can't compute this. And so because of that, then you sort of get stalled, and it has a very destructive, like literally destructive effect on our neurology.
Yeah. What's coming to my memory is noticing that change in my memory and then getting accused of lying or changing. Well, if this is true, you'd remember. And I'm like, that makes sense. Like, why can't I remember? Right? Not knowing is part of the whole physiological damage of it.
Yeah. And it makes the gaslighting more effective. Have you heard of gaslight syndrome? You know what that is?
I've heard of gaslighting, but I'd love to have you explain it.
So I'm trying to remember her name, Mitchell. I can't remember her first name. And I know there's a TV series that came out about her. So there was this, during Watergate, she was the one that sort of caught on that her husband may be involved and knew something suspicious was going on. And so they actually hospitalized her, claiming that she was crazy. That actually happens a lot there, so that you can start to become so dysfunctional that the people who are then say, you're the problem, you have this problem and you're sick. And then you look sick. And so then the whole psychiatric community believes that you're sick. And then you get labeled, identified, and treated as though you're sick. That's called gaslight syndrome. It's a real thing. Wow. It's a real problem. Actually had to happen. I actually had a client years back ago who had a form of schizophrenia, and he kept saying, somebody's after me, they're trying to kill me. And we thought, oh no, that's a paranoid delusion. And put him on medication, treated him, and yet that belief would never respond to the medication. So I remember I was in that case presentation that day for the psychiatrist, and he said, we're going to have to release him. He's been here as long as we can keep him, but we just cannot get this delusion. We can't fix this delusion for him. So I went ahead and they released him. And sure enough, 2 weeks later in the newspaper, it comes to find out that he'd been running drugs, and one of the big gangs or whoever had a hit on him, but they were trying to kill him. Wow. But here he'd been, seen as crazy because he was saying this, which is even why I struggle saying that I was likely being poisoned, because my next inclination is I want to give you all the proof to tell you that I really was being poisoned. By the way, I have a membership of where I see a lot of survivors, and I once asked how many of them were fed something that was not edible, or likely they think they'd been poisoned. The majority of the group's hands went up. This is a common problem. A common problem. And is anyone talking about it? No, we're not talking about it. Because we feel crazy saying it.
Yeah. That is so terrifying to think that there's
really terrifying. I could tell you stories of what I've heard, and it's horrifying. Another person I know was nearly killed by it. This person, his partner had medical knowledge and was using the knowledge against him.
Wow.
So it's shocking.
My gosh. I can't believe we're already at an hour. It's been such a good conversation. Lastly, what has worked most for you in terms of healing? What do you see with your clients or with people in your networks? How can people move on from this?
So the first thing, when you get out of these relationships, I would even like to back up. Don't see the lack of being able to leave as a failure. It's not. It's common. See it as learning a new muscle. And you're going to learn what didn't work that time and prepare better. You're going to work that area and get better to do it then. You see it as trying. The Thomas Edison 10,000 times of making a light bulb. No, it wasn't. He didn't fail 10,000 times. He just found 10,000 different ways light bulbs didn't work. So view it from that standpoint with a lot of patience. When you get out, you're going to feel decimated. And expect that. Expect that you don't know what to do with yourself, you don't know what to do with your time, and that you're obsessed with this person and what happened. That's very, very normal. So create a lot of patience and space for yourself for that. I find developing a structure right away. Make a plan for your day, schedule it out. Even if it feels ridiculous, but schedule it out. Because what we'll do is you're going to want to contact that person. The pull to get back and check in or find out why they did it or get some answers or whatever, it's going to be so strong that it's going to be nearly possible to resist. It's interesting. One of the people that I know personally was in one of these relationships, and she also had battled a heroin addiction. She admitted that, and she actually admitted it on one of the podcast episodes. She said, because the saying is, this is worse than a heroin addiction to break. She said, yeah, actually, that's true. Because I've done it.
Wow.
I've done a
Oh my
heroin
gosh.
addiction, and I've had one of these, and this was harder. So expect an intense withdrawal. Intense withdrawal. You're going to want to contact them. The best way to do that is plan for it, just like you'd plan to get off cigarettes. So what are you going to do with your time? Who are you going to be in touch with? The other thing is your social support system has been decimated. You probably don't have one. So start to find ways of rebuilding it, which is hard, takes time, and you don't trust very well now. That's why I really feel like community support is so important. That's why I have a membership, why I know other psychologists like myself, Dr. Ramani, Dr. Nay, Dr. Nadine Macaluso, people like us, we have memberships because we strongly believe the community is where it's at, because you need to now know you're not alone and there's not something wrong with you. This is normal. So find validation, a safe place to get validated and supported. And then patience. And I definitely think there's a role for finding a professional, a specialist to help you walk through this. But know that there's a lot to unpack, a whole lot, and this is going to take time. And it's going to feel like you're always taking a step back, but you're not. You're learning, you're growing, you're exploring, and rediscover yourself. Like really sit down and like ask yourself, what do I want to do? What do I like to do? What foods have I stopped eating that maybe are my favorite? What hobbies did I let go of that maybe I should revisit? Start to kind of find that tiny little voice inside yourself and start to listen to that person again and give it space, and it will come back. It takes time, but it will come back. And for me, I know this is not something I tell everybody, but I found for me, I'm a very, I may not ever feel like I'm an angry person. My anger is never an overt. It moves into tenaciousness and determination, perseverance. I just like, damn it, you're not taking me down. So
Yeah.
take that intense emotional feeling that you have and channel it. Channel it in some productive direction, like sort of almost see it like it's your way to flip them off.
Mhm.
Literally, like because your best revenge is to have a better life.
Yeah.
They want you decimated. They want to say, see, I told you they were a nothing and nobody. That's why I got rid of them. They want that. Your best life in your best form of revenge is to have a life that even better. That shows them that they were nothing and a nobody. Because
Mhm.
otherwise, if you're left in a decimated place where you can never leave home and do anything, in a way, they still have power over you.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to have one iota of power over me. Are they watching you? Yes. They're probably stalking you. Yes. Expect that. Are they smearing you? Absolutely. Of course. That smear campaign started the moment you met them. They already had a narrative. They figured out what your weakness was and where your insecurity was, and they start playing that off slowly over time and building the story about how you're that sensitive, or how you're that anxious person, or she's always afraid to do things, or whatever it is. They started playing
Right.
that off from the moment they met. You expect that. It actually, for me, is a great way to separate your social support system from healthy people to not healthy people. People who believe them were never on your side. You don't want them in your life anyway. So just sort of see that as, okay, I'm going to have to cut that group out. And maybe it is your whole community. I've known people who've had to move over and start over. It may take that, but focus on taking all that anger, that pain, that betrayal, and use it to project yourself forward to really focusing and recovering yourself.
That's beautiful and so much grace. I'm glad you brought up the community thing. I think that was almost just as hard for me as leaving, was seeing who believed him. People that have been my friends for,
Yeah.
acquaintances or people in my life for over 10 years. And this was not even a 5-year relationship. So I was like, are you kidding? Like, that was almost more hurtful because I know that they're not abusing me, right?
Yeah.
That was
I know.
extremely painful.
It's very devastating. Very.
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate everything you've shared with us. Where can people find you? Where is your book being sold? Where can they find your membership option?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So the best way to find out about all of that is to go KerryMcAvoy, Ph.D.com. But I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Kerry McAvoy, Ph.D. So that's another great way to. And I have a podcast called Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. And the book Love You More: The Harrowing Tale of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross. If you want to know all the nitty gritty of exactly what happened, and it's explicit, so strap in for the ride. It's not like a self help. It's more of a tell all. My memoir is sold on Amazon, but also on my webpage.
Wonderful. Dr. Kerry McAvoy, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been wonderful to have you today.
Oh, it was my pleasure.